back to the program Addiction and Recovery. We do apologize for that technical glitch, but let's join with Mr. Ramnaresh Dwarka. Sitaramji, sir.
Join with you in welcoming all our listeners, both in Trinidad and Tobago and worldwide, as this program is also carried on the worldwide net, on the internet, on Facebook. And for those of you who might miss it or don't have the time to listen to the whole program, you can always come back later on at the same station, later on tonight at 10 o'clock. There's a repeat of the program. And you may also be able to access it online on YouTube at my channel, that is Ramnaresh Dwarka on YouTube. So we have been speaking, Jason, in the past, and I've actually been recording and posting these programs because each one of them can help a person. We have done programs on how to identify whether you're an alcoholic or drug addict. Remember, we did the 12 questions. We have also looked at the principles of recovery as is used by Alcoholics Anonymous worldwide. And Alcoholics Anonymous is one of the most successful fellowships in the world when it comes to helping people with alcoholism. And now the same principles that Alcoholics Anonymous have been using, Jason, are being used by Narcotics Anonymous, Overeaters Anonymous, Gamblers Anonymous. So many other 12-step programs have developed and mushroomed around the same 12 principles. That is finding favor and lending support to people worldwide. It is estimated almost 3 million people now are in recovery worldwide in 189 countries. And indeed, in Trinidad and Tobago, we are so fortunate that we have a radio station that is religiously putting this program out every week as a public service. And we do also have AA groups that is more, we have more AA groups per capita than any other country in the world. And this is largely due to the pioneers of AA in Trinidad and Tobago since 1956. So I know that there's a lot of people who are in recovery. There are people who are attempting to deal with their drinking or drug problem and other addictive behaviors like gambling and that sort of thing, overeating. And they can get help with the program. And of course, this is an interactive program and we welcome anyone who can raise any questions. And we would be only too happy to assist them. So that today I thought we could speak about some of the factors relating to alcohol, drug addiction. I think we're still getting some noises in the background. There are factors that predisposes a person to alcoholism and drug addiction. There are also factors that precipitate drug use. That is, factors that could actually start a person off on a life of addiction. And then there are factors that perpetuate a person's addiction. For those people who have become addicted or dependent on drugs, there are factors that perpetuate that, cause them to want to continue. And this morning, we will speak a little bit about these factors that relate to drug addiction. Now, in terms of predisposing factors, there are biological factors that could predispose a person to drug addiction. There are psychological factors and there are social factors. So we'll first look at some of the predisposing biological factors. And today, we know that there have been, it is established by science that there is a genetic predisposition to alcoholism and drug addiction. In that, if your parent, both mother or father, grandmother, grandfather on either side of your parent, father or mother side, or even up to your great-grandfather, if they were alcoholic or drug addict, the same way we inherit our looks, our complexion, our ethnicity, Jason, from our ancestors, so too, if they were addicted to substances, we could inherit that genes that predisposes us to alcoholism or drug addiction. Now, why that is an important thing to note is that any one of us can look back into our families, our ancestors, and see, if our father or mother were alcoholics or drug addicts, there's a higher predisposition for us to becoming alcoholic or drug addict. If our grandfather, this goes up to any one of our ancestors on either side, mother side, father side, were alcoholic or drug addicts, we can be predisposed. So that I'm saying that so that people who have a history of alcoholism and drug addiction in their family need to be especially careful because they are more likely. Now, it is not a done deal where once your father or mother was alcoholic, you are sentenced to becoming an alcoholic. But a higher percentage, it is estimated between 60 to 80% of people whose both parents were alcoholics have a tendency to become alcoholics or drug addicts themselves. So that, as I say this, even though you may be genetically predisposed to alcoholism, you inherited this disease from your ancestors, it is not to be seen as a life sentence that you do not have, choices. Although it may not be your fault, but if once the fact is, once you realize you are genetically predisposed, you need to be especially careful. And how do you know? Because the person who is genetically predisposed, Jason, they're the kind of person who the first day they go and take a drink, they have a tendency want to drink till they get drunk because it's already in them, So I'm saying this especially for people who have a history of alcoholism in their family. They need to be especially careful around alcohol and other drugs because they might be more likely to become addicted and dependent. However, this is something that can also be learned. You can be born with it, but you can also become, because there have been several research shows that children who grow up in homes where there's a high incidence of alcohol use have a higher tendency to become predisposed to becoming alcoholics and drug addicts. Because, Jason, children learn what they see, what they live, what they experience. Think about it for a minute. How many things we have learned from our parents. Our parents and our siblings are our first reference group. So that whenever we think about how to deal with a situation in relation to others, we naturally behind our head go back to the fact what our parents would have done or used to do in situations like this. So that when we think about entertaining guests or celebrating an occasion, do you know what first comes to mind? If our parents used to stock up with alcohol and serve alcohol on those occasions, that's what we know, and that is what we will do. So this is something you could be born with, but this is something that you can become with time. That is to say, all right, the psychological predisposing factors, what we have found is that people who would have started using it recreationally in the past, for fun, realizing that, look, when you take a drink, you feel transformed. You feel, it changes your mood from being dull and, depressed and reserved and all of that. After a few drinks, you become energized. You become the butterfly in the party. You can now dance and sing and be quite outgoing. For the person who is naturally suffering with low self-esteem and is very reserved and not extroverted, introverted, that is to say, who don't really feel confident to mix and mingle. When after a few drinks, man, you'd be surprised to see them on the floor. You understand? They are very outgoing now and they're very, sometimes even becoming boisterous. So that when these things happen, the memory, it's embedded in the memory. The person who is quiet, who would watch people dance when the tassa is playing, remember that, if I take a few drinks, I could dance as well. Or I could ask a girl to dance, or I could speak to a girl that normally I would feel intimidated to do. And the brain remembers these things. So we take that as a coping device later on as we go on in life, so that every time we feel stressed out, we feel depressed, we feel disappointed, we realize we could take a drink or take a smoke or something like that, and we could immediately change our moods. And gradually, with time, that psychological dependence, the poor coping skills that we have, that we use alcohol to bolster, becomes a habit. So these set the stage for a psychological dependence. So that, again, to repeat, some people would have been genetically predisposed, it's in their genes, and the first time they go and drink, they tend to drink till they get drunk. Every time they go to drink, they can't seem to stop at one. And those would be people who have become physically and genetically, biologically dependent on the drug. And for those, there are certain consequences. If I should go back to that, when that person stopped drinking, they have physical withdrawal symptoms. That is to say, the hands start shaking, they feel nauseous, they vomit. If they, when they try to stop drinking the next day, they can't eat properly, they may suffer with impotence, they sometimes even start hallucinating and all of that. So all of these are biological withdrawal symptoms, but there's also psychological withdrawal symptoms where the person becomes depressed or anxious. And then there are some persons who might be naturally, because of their life situations, because of maybe estrangement from a spouse, or loss of a job or business, or some other physical impairment, which could be rooted in biological, an accident that leaves a person unable to work now, vehicle accident and all of that. That might have happened because of drinking as well. Now, to deal with the loss of job, loss of income, loss of family sometimes, loss of self-esteem, these both relate to physical, biological factors as well as psychological factors that can now predispose a person. That can actually precipitate the drinking in a person's life. An accident or an injury, a loss of job, a divorce, estrangement, something like that. Even imprisonment, a crime, you are imprisoned. And as I say that, we know, from the grapevine, that in prison, there's no difficulty to get certain kinds of drugs. Unfortunately, we have had officers who have been implicated in drug smuggling and all of that. And I know from experience, part of my training in Jamaica, I worked in the prison system as a parole officer. So I have that firsthand view. I've spoken to a lot of prisoners in Trinidad and people who were sent to prison because of crimes related to drug addiction or drug smuggling or selling drugs. You'd think that maybe the punishment in prison would have acted as a deterrent, but no. As soon as they come out, or even while they're there, they continue to use the drugs once they can get it. So there is, as again, psychological predisposing factors, people who are unable to deal with stress and who might have started using drugs recreationally, find they could start using the drugs to help them to cope now with stress and depression and disappointment and things like that. And then there are social predisposing factors. Jason, and I'm sure you could think of a whole lot of them. We live in a society where there's no shortage of social reasons to drink. You understand? Almost every social occasion in this country. And now I would say in a lot of the developed worldwide. I have traveled to North America and I've mixed with Caribbean people in New York and in Florida. And especially in those places, I'm not saying this to put anybody down, but West Indian people it has been my experience. Whenever there's a get together in Queens or any one of Brooklyn, any one of these places, boy, it seems like it's a occasion to drink. I don't, I've never seen a celebration without drink. There might probably be, but you know, the whole thing, Labor Day and all of that, it's punctuated. It's a blowout on drinking and drug use. So that in Trinidad, I can speak directly to that in that whenever there's a get together, name it Christmas, Carnival, Easter, you know, Labor Day, you name it, any public holiday, you know, you'll find a lot of people heading to the rivers, heading to the beaches, and the cooler is there. And it is not only the public holidays and the beaches. You know, I mean, I have been to so many weddings where almost every car has a cooler in the trunk. And in the cooler, the most prominent beverage is the alcohol or the chaser to go with the alcohol. So that we have no shortage of social reasons in this country. And when for a person, and this is why I'm saying this is because our children, the young people grow up, we grow up seeing that. You know, I could remember growing up in the countryside, you know, when family come, they will send us little fellas to the shop to even with a bag, and you know, we'll go and buy the drink, because although they had a sign outside that there's an age restriction, you and I know, Jason, that nobody follows that, you know, that they sell cigarettes to anybody who would buy. It doesn't matter your age, they'll sell alcohol to anybody who has the money. And anybody could go into the grocery now and pick it up and put it in the cart. It doesn't matter how tall you are, how short. You understand? These restrictions are just there because the law requires it, but the society don't seem to care about these things. So these social factors, in fact, it is so ingrained in our DNA, I would say, especially in the Caribbean, in Trinidad, I can say, you know, if a guy came to your house, Jason, and you offered him Moby, you offered him peanut punch, you offered him Seamoss, any other drink, he's likely to, when he leave, tell his friends, boy, you know, I'll go by Jason, and then man never even offer me a drink. Because a drink is not Seamoss, it's not Moby, it's not orange juice. In Trinidad, when you tell a friend, let's go take a drink, he already assumes that we are going to drink alcohol. Not so. You understand? So it is part of our lifestyle, I would say. You know, and then the proliferation of advertisements. Again, I must stop to recognize the management of this particular media house, where you have probably sacrificed millions of dollars in revenue by having a policy not to advertise alcohol on your station, both your radio and television. And stations like this and management like this need to be commended. You know, I have had the experience of working in another media house. I wouldn't call the name. Initially, when I started doing this program in 1993 on another station, it was a radio station. And you know, Jason, a certain drug alcohol manufacturer wanted to put a advertisement for a beer, a popular beer, right in the middle of my program. And here I am talking about alcoholism and drug addiction, and they wanted to put an advertisement for alcohol use. And I said no, because again, I've never taken any money for doing these programs. You know, I do it as a social service, as a public service myself. And, you know, and it is probably one of the reasons I've never accepted any remuneration, because the people who pay the piper will tell you what tune to play. I want to reserve the right at all time to keep this program principled. Because, in fact, let me go so far as to say, you know, when you stand for something, then you wouldn't fall for everything. In life, you need to stand for something. I have a business place here where we sell food to customers. And in our business, me and my wife have taken a principled position, just like Jagriti has. We will not sell any alcohol. We are not selling any cigarettes. We're not selling any of these energy drinks. If it's not good for you, we are not going to sell it for you. It doesn't matter what revenue we have to sacrifice. And I think that is important. And if everyone listening to this program would take positions today that look, that is what it takes. If you are going to rid our society of the scourge of drug addiction, every one of us, it has to begin with me and you. Yes, for many, many years, Jason, I'm going a little bit off the predisposing and precipitating things here, factors, but for many years, I sat there and I said, what am I going to do? After I stopped drinking myself, I thought, I alone can't change this society. And how many of us, we sit down and say, boy, no matter what I do, people are still going to drink. They're going to still do all the things they're doing. But then I remember people like Martin Luther King. I remember people like Jesus Christ. I remember people like Gandhi. These were only one person. And look how many single persons, our own Satnarayan Maharaj, one man who is, I would say, so largely responsible for us having this media house today, to have a voice, to speak on this issue. And this is because you can look at what the effort of one person can do. We have our own Vijay Maharaj now, who I don't miss any of his articles. I want to thank him publicly for sending me his articles. I read them. I send back little notes to him, right on point. So that we need to encourage people like that. If we talk about wanting to see a reduction in crime, a reduction, and we know the relationship between crime and drug use. And the drug business is rooted in crime as well. All the people who are the suppliers and the sellers and all of that, it is rooted in crime. Notwithstanding the fact that some of the other drugs, the cocaine and the marijuana, the marijuana has been made, well, not legal, but its use has been decriminalized up to a certain point. Cocaine still remain illegal, and all the other synthetic drugs, the designer drugs, they're still illegal. Notwithstanding all of that, people are still using them. And this is why I've decided this morning, let us look at the factors in our society so that parents can look at what example they're setting for their children. People who are growing up in family with a history of alcoholism. In my family, for instance, my father and mother never used alcohol, really. They were not alcoholics. But my grandfather was a heavy user. And that is what I would say today predisposed me as well to drinking alcohol. So that, it is to be forewarned is important. Prevention is always better than cure. So that if you know that you are at risk, then you need to be especially careful. And this is why I'm looking at these factors, the biological factors, and then those people who, because of stress, start using it to help them to cope and then become dependent. And this is something, alcoholism and drug addiction is cunning, baffling, and powerful, that you don't realize the person who is using it is totally unaware when they have crossed that imaginary borderline from recreational use into compulsive use. And because of the stigma associated, they will be the last one to ever want to admit that they have a problem with alcohol or drugs, because it is not a pleasant thing. They get looked down upon. So that, again, if we know what will predispose us, we will be more careful. If we also know what will cause us, predispose us psychologically, we will put things in place. Like, again, let me thank the staff here for the video that was played just before the program that spoke about finding happiness. You understand? So that a lot of people will learn these coping skills that are healthy coping skills, like taking care of your health so that you do not become health compromised, taking care of your mental state, your mental health, by doing things like meditation and mindfulness and all of that. You know, in a world where a lot of people, from the time you say meditation, they think about yoga and Hinduism and all of that and think, well, no, no, no. I am not a Hindu, so that's not for me. So they have coined a new term, mindfulness, which is the same thing. If you want to call it, there's a saying, Jason, a rose by any name is just as sweet. So whether you call it mindfulness or you call it meditation, it will still do the right things for you. You will find, and this is why meditation is a very integral part for people who are in recovery. And I had spoken about that when we talked about step 11 in the recovery program of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is which states that sought through prayer and meditation to obtain conscious contact with God, praying only for the knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. But what meditation does, Jason, it helps us to become more and more aware of what our mind is doing. We can catch our mind once it decides to react to any thought. We have no control over the thoughts that come in our mind, but we have control is whether we react to it or we respond to those things. And meditation helps us to be able to actually see where our mind is taking us and prevent ourselves from actually translating the thoughts into actions. So we can stop ourselves from going to take that drink. And this is especially important for people in recovery, meditation. But coming back to, we have looked at the biological, the genes that could predispose you. We have looked at the inability to cope and deal with stress in a normal, healthy way. And we have also looked at some of the social factors, the culture of a society that predisposes us. We are carnival culture, we are, partying kind of culture in Trinidad and Tobago. And I'm sure people who are listening abroad can also identify in their own communities where a lot of people have turned to alcohol and drugs to help them to cope with psychological stressors. And then there's the social and cultural factors that will either cause people to drink more or drink less. Now, there are some places in the world where alcohol is completely, like in the Middle East, in the Islamic countries, where alcohol is a no-no. It's actually legally banned in some places, but it is not to say that people don't go underground and use it. Even, I mean, in the 1930s, remember the movement in America where they tried to ban alcohol, and all of these, what you call speakeasies, they used to call them, where people will open bars in basements, and you have all the bootlegging that gave rise to the mafia and Al Capone and all those guys, that eventually we were able to see in movies and all of that. So that there is that desire in human beings to experience another reality. And I want to say this cuts across the board of whether you are psychologically predisposed or genetically predisposed or you're living in a culture. In every culture, human beings have become aware. In all those times when we sit in primary school, Jason, and we go daydreaming, we go into a world of fantasy. In our dreams, we go into a world of fantasy. And so we know that there is a fantasy world that we can slip into. And this is one of the lures, that the attractions of drug addiction, in that we can artificially transform into that euphoric stage. And I want to say, when I would have discussed meditation, meditation is one of the safe ways to experience that euphoria, that serenity, that blissfulness, without having the expense and the consequences of drugs and drug addiction, alcoholism. So these are all coping devices that we can promote. There are societies that do this, like in Japan and in China and some of these places, where at the beginning of the work day, the entire workforce, they go out in the yard and they do things like Tai Chi and Qigong, you know, which some people have described as meditation in motion. Tai Chi is described as meditation in motion, where, and they've found that when after the workers do that, they become much more focused. They can become more productive in the workplace. They present with lesser problems. And I'm saying that we have all of these examples that have been tried and tested over so many eons, times of, hundreds of years. And we have it available to us. In fact, I had suggested to one of the curriculum development officers at the Ministry of Education when I was a board member at the National Alcohol and Drug Abuse Prevention Program that at 10 minutes of quiet time, if you don't want to call it meditation or mindfulness, you can call it quiet time. Take any number of the children who are presenting with behavioral problems, have them meet every morning in a quiet, in a room that dedicated for the purpose that is quiet, and have them sit quietly for 10 minutes. And I could guarantee you, you are going to see an improvement in the behavior of these children. That's all they have to do. Sit quietly, close their eyes, and be in a meditative state. And that can be taught, just like the program before my program said, that these behaviors can be acquired and learned because coping skills are learned over time. And, I have often wondered why the denominational schools do so well. And I had a conversation just 2 weeks ago with a gentleman who is a leader in the area of Pratini Sabha. And he was saying that, look, one of the reasons he believes that children in these denominational schools do so well is because you start the day with singing and prayers. All those people like myself who went to Hindu school, I went to Devi Hindu school, and we would start the morning by saying our morning prayers. We would sing bhajans before we go into school. And just take a pin for a minute, Jason, when we're talking, like I'm talking and you are shaking your head like this because you are agreeing with what I'm saying. And if you didn't agree with something, you'd probably shake your head like this, right? So there's a yes, yes, no, no going on in your mind. But if I started singing a song, you wouldn't be shaking your head, yes, no. Because when we're singing, it is not debating, it's not argumentative. And this is what singing. You'd notice if you are angry after you start singing, you have no choice but to become different, to become calm. You understand? Singing has that. Music has that effect on us. And prayers, just saying that primal song, Om. If you are disturbed and you just sit and say that 3 times, you are going to become quiet and your environment is going to become quiet. I'm not saying these things out of the top of my head. These are things I practice, and I would suggest anyone listening to this program, whatever religious persuasion you belong to, you can do this practice. In fact, in every religion, the sound Om is present for those who don't realize it. Because Amen is a colloquialization of the word Om, the sound Om. Ameen, that is used in Islam, is also a colloquialization of the sound Om, as is used in Hinduism. So that, we may think we are different, but we are not. And the sound, sound has a profound influence on us. And it is probably one of the reasons that children who attend the denominational schools, they do so well because they go to their classes in a very calm and receptive state of mind. And I'm asking our people in the education facilities to consider this. If you have children presenting with behavioral problems, introduce them to the use. In fact, in all the schools, if we invested 10 minutes every morning to make the rest of the 23 hours and 50 minutes better for the teachers and the children, I could guarantee you we are going to see a transformation in this society. You know, I saw the headlines this morning. The, the police commissioner admits that she failed at her project because the methods we are using will not bring those. We are not. We are just dealing with the symptoms of the crime issue. We are not dealing with the causes, the root causes. What I just spoke about, I would be glad to sit with anyone and help them to develop programs. Anyone in schools, I throw this invitation today for guidance counselors in any school in Trinidad and Tobago. I'd be willing to work with them to help them to start introducing the use of meditation or quiet time in their school populations, and you will see a drastic reduction in behavioral problems, and I'm sure you're going to see an appreciation in the performance of your children. And I say that in the firm belief because I know I have actually experienced this working with groups. I also would like to say to other groups, temple groups, other voluntary organizations in our society and worldwide. These are things that, the conventional methods we have been using have not been working, Jason. And if you're doing the same thing the same way and expecting a different result, that is the definition of insanity. And that is exactly what the alcoholic and the drug user have been doing for years. Telling himself, look, I'm going today and I'm just going to take 2 beers and come home, only to find he gets drunk again. And then a day or 2 days later, he's doing the same thing. As a society, we too have to look at what we have been doing, how we have been doing, because clearly you judge, they say the proof of the pudding is in the tasting, the result of it. If the results we are getting from our population, if the crime rate is going up, we have to look at, the unemployment rate is going up. We have to look at what are the root causes of this. And on coming programs, I'm going to address some of these things. The whole question of parenting and all of that, as it predisposes people to drug addiction and criminal lifestyles and so on. Yes, I had the opportunity, Jason, in this lifetime of mine to also be the director of family services in Trinidad and Tobago. So I have been there, done that. I worked in the social services for many, many years. In the magistracy already, also where I was able to see the effects of, what is happening in the world of crime and all of that, and have an insight into what are some of the factors, listening to the explanations, reading the probation officer's report as to why a young man got himself into trouble before the courts. And I have a wealth of knowledge in these areas, and I invite anyone who would like to engage me in a conversation or invite me to speak to their groups. As I say this, I have an invitation from the Hindu Women's Organization coming straight out of this program to do a lecture in a series that they are doing at the Balmain Temple during the month of August. So I want to let other groups know that, look, we can't just sit down there and, bemoan the fact and complain. It is easy to do that and blame the government and blame others. But today, what am I doing? What are you doing? What are you part of the problem or are you part of the solution? Which one you want to be? And if you want to be a part of the solution, first you have to put yourself in the boat before you can take anybody from the water and put them in the boat. Meaning you have to, if you're using drugs, you have to stop and stay sober first before you can reach out a hand to anyone else. And today I extend a hand to anyone out there who think that they may be having a problem with alcoholism or drug addiction. They can reach out to me. I could be reached at 1-868-671-3040. That is for anyone internationally. They can call me at that number or they can text me. And I would be only willing to respond. And I want to let them know that help is available. I know a lot of people have been calling you all at the television station, Jason, and getting the numbers, getting the information, and sourcing the help. There are many, many people that you all don't even know who have not seen you have not seen, but who have come to recovery because of this program and the efforts that you all are making at the television station as well. So I want to thank you, Jason, and the team behind the scenes, Francis and all of, he has been putting together a lot of videos, and he has promised to even do something about my background here this morning. So we look forward to that. And I want to thank you all again. And to all our listeners listening out there, that please have a safe day, have a drug-free life. Thank you very much.
This program, Dwarka, and the help is readily available also at your fingertips. So until next week, Thursday, same time, same station. Until then, Sitaram.